each and every citizen, in fact. So FTCCI takes great pride in organizing this program, which is extremely relevant to the industry at the moment. And to begin with, I would like to share information about FTCCI. We are an industry association with around 3,000 members, and we work across 17 verticals of business, and we have expert committees across all these sectors. And information and communication technology is one of the committee under which this program is being organized. And Mr. Balaprasad Pedigari is the chairperson, Mr. Pankaj Diwan is a co-chair, and Mr. Anirudh CV is another co-chair for this committee. And myself, Director FTCCI, also take care of this Information and Communication Technology Committee. So FTCCI acts as a bridge between the industry and the government. So many a time we are like a voice of the industry. We take representations from the industry to the relevant department in the government, and many a times our voice has been heard, and we have been able to successfully resolve many issues pertaining to the industry. So as we move on, I wouldn't like to take much time. I would like to play a film about FTCCI, which will give you a much larger perspective of FTCCI, every citizen, in fact. So FTCCI takes great pride in
Hyderabad, a confluence of cultures, a bridge between tradition and modernity, and a city with a timeless allure. While the world grappled with conflict in 1917, a pivotal moment quietly unfolded here. A group of visionary leaders came together to form the Deccan Chamber of Commerce, which began as a spark but went on to shape the destiny of an entire region. With a legacy spanning over a century, this institution is now known as the Federation of Telangana Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FTCCI. FTCCI has become the cornerstone of industrial and economic progress of Hyderabad, which has emerged as a global hub for information technology, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and other key industries. FTCCI champions a pro-business ecosystem not just in Telangana, but across the nation. It addresses the real-time needs of direct and indirect members through expert committees led by seasoned professionals. FTCCI contributes to state-level advisory committees, publishes white papers and journals, and provides research that drives decision-making. Its Skill Development Center conducts programs that empower both individuals and industries. FTCCI has adopted 15 government ITIs to ensure that Telangana's workforce remains competitive and work-ready through bridging skill gaps. The services of FTCCI include issuing of Certificate of Origin, visa recommendation letters for business travel, consultancy services in GST compliances, and guidance for aspiring entrepreneurs. It also enables global collaboration that positions Telangana as a happening business destination. Each year, FTCCI honors outstanding business achievements through its annual Excellence Awards that span 20 categories, including HR Excellence. These accolades recognize innovation, resilience, and best practices that motivate industries to strive for greater impact and growth. FTCCI invites you to be part of a dynamic, trailblazing organization. Join the movement to ignite entrepreneurial spirit, empower businesses, and drive India towards self-reliance. The future is ours to shape. Let's realize it together.
So that's the majestic FTCCI for all of you. And for all the newcomers and people who are new to FTCCI, I would like to request you all to kind of, explore the option of becoming a member of FTCCI so that you can leverage on all the benefits associated with being an FTCCI member. So now I'd like to request Mr. Balaprasad Petigari, Chairperson for the ICT Committee, to give the introductory remarks and also moderate the session. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Federation of Telangana Chambers of Commerce and Industry, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's session. FTCCI, through its ICT and Startup Committee, works at the intersection of technology, regulation, and enterprise impact. Our mandate is very, very simple, but very critical, and help industry leaders, startups, and enterprises anticipate regulatory change, translate into business-ready strategies, and build future resilient digital capabilities. Sessions like today will really unfold, and it is designed not as academic discussions but as decision-grade conversations for leaders who really own outcomes. Setting the theme, why this particular session really matters for all of us. Most conversations around the DPDP Act 2023 stop at clauses. Some of them stop at the penalties and compliance checklist. But today's session deliberately takes a different path. Instead of asking what does the law say, we start now asking what is the law trying to prevent: loss of individual control, unmanaged data harm, invisible processing, organizational indifference to the privacy risks. This reverse engineering lens helps leaders move from paper compliance to demonstrable defensible implementation, which truly across the governance, operations and system design can really help us in the journey. This is especially relevant for DPOs, CISOs, CIOs, CTOs, and senior management and board members who are really accountable not just for policies but for outcomes. Now, my honor and privilege to introduce today's speaker. It is very, very fitting to have with us Srinu Pasunuri, a seasoned cybersecurity and privacy governance advisor with over 30 years of experience. Srinu has worked closely with organizations to design and operate regulator-ready data protection programs with deep expertise as privacy governance, cybersecurity controls, DPDP Act 2023 and DPDP Rules 2025. He also focused his journey in privacy by design and default, and also expert in accountability and defensible implementations. More recently, his advisory work has expanded into AI governance, helping enterprises align emerging AI use cases with the data protection, security, and risk management expectations, bringing a much needed systems and governance perspectives to privacy in the age of AI. And with this context setting, I now invite you to approach these sessions not as a legal briefing but as a governance and system design conversation, one that truly equips you to ask better questions, engage with the speaker, make better decisions, and build trustworthy digital enterprise outcomes. With that note, I welcome Sinu to take over the session. Floor is yours, Sinu.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for kind words, actually, for the invitation and for this honor to be here, actually. Thank you so much, Mr. Bala, Sangeeta, and Mr. Mohan Raidu, actually, who was actually instrumental in actually me joining this particular elite group of people, actually. I'm so delighted to be here. In fact, when we were actually talking, and the idea first proposed that, can we have a session on a DPDP? My thinking was, everybody actually speaks about the clauses and everything. I wanted to, we actually wanted to jointly to think differently because, me, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not actually practicing anything around being clause-based advisor for anything. I've been using technology to address the compliance issues over the last 30 years of my experience. So I thought, why not we think differently? And then the idea came that, why not we reverse engineer it and present it in a very different way than actually, talking about the clauses, what are the rules which are recently rolled out on November 14th, and what was actually there from 2023 on the table, and what industry was actually doing from 2023 till now. So we thought, we'll take a different route. That's the reason, this title, Reverse Engineering the DPDP Act 2023 came. And it's very basically, very clearly mentioning on the, this slide here itself that, we don't want to think about clause-based thing. We still want to see what is that DPDP is trying to prevent actually, because, all the acts, if you really see, any act when is rolled out by any regulatory authority, it is basically designed to succeed people rather than actually, trying to have a failure model, because everybody benefits when the act actually results in some kind of a orderly implementation across, so that as a society, as a community, as a country, we actually benefit from that. So that's the reason, I think that, designing systems that can never fail, or even that they fail, they'll actually fail safe. Because if you have a system which is designed from the ground up to thinking the compliance is actually mandatory, but having the control. So we'll go over our next slides about, what is my experience around it, and what is that actually I'm trying to pose to all of you to think, because this is not something I'm going to conclude. I want you to think beyond this. This is only a triggering point. My conversation with you with these slides, this 50 minutes on what I'm going to get, is only to trigger the thought differently. Not that I'm actually presenting the complete culminated knowledge, because it's not possible actually within this 1 hour or even days actually. So I'm just trying to use my 30 years of experience and actually working with various countries and various GDPR and other areas where privacy was one of the most important thing to worry about, designing the HIPAA related activities and focusing on PII, PHI, and working as a CISO, working as actually, their trusted partner to secure and protect the privacy of the data, which is actually one of the most important ingredient for anybody to either, from hacker side, from the adversary side. It's always important to get hands-on, and from a business point of view, from the legitimate user point of view, how to really prevent that being happening actually. So this is quickly me. I'm, my name now. Thank you very much, Mr. Bala, Madam Sangeeta, for actually an introduction here. So I've been focused and working only with technologies for a period of time. Though I have a lot of GRC experience as well, but I've been really fascinated to work with architects. In fact, I even have set up a solution architects. I remember rightly the name, where we actually were thinking how to design secure architecture itself, right from even before a system is actually taken a shape, or even an idea is actually taken a shape. So then, going quickly to this, why this webinar is actually, I think, Mr. Bala already outlined very clearly. We are not trying to talk about DPDP Act or their clauses or anything like that. We want to definitely take an engineering side of it. We want to take an engineering lens to see how we can actually benefit, how actually can organizations can be compliant, because compliance is not coming at a cheap rate today, because it's actually, I'm not again getting into a legal thing where penalties and everything, but even implementation itself is actually very, very expensive to really think. But if rightly done with technology, that also can be actually kept under control, because if you use a technology lens, and if you think from how a design itself is going to prevent certain unwanted acts from the system behavior itself, things are going to be very, very different. That is the intention of this particular webinar. So basically, the core premise is basically to understand that we. So let me go off the video, because I hear some. Yeah, and then minimize here, because the screen is actually better for me here. Okay, so basically the DPDP is best understood by reverse engineering. What I mean, we'll actually see over the next slides actually here, right? So before we jump into it, I want to quickly talk about some numbers here, because if we cannot measure, we cannot improve anything, whether it is privacy, security, or anything in life. If something is not measurable, that definitely cannot be, matured or actually improved actually. So if you really take this particular, cost of friction, where, there's a cost of every data breach is increasing high in India as well. Every year, almost like 10 to 15% in between that rate, the cost of every data breach is actually increasing. And these are the statistics coming from the industry based on the data breaches happened around India, around the world, to really present a very, very alarming number here. Because, if you really take a $2.6 million for every breach, or a 22 crore a breach cost, you can take, small and medium companies will be simply vanishing from the, existence itself actually. So it's very, very important we know the cost of every data breach. And definitely, what are the things which will actually contribute to these kind of data breaches actually? One of the things which, again, I suddenly introducing a shadow AI here. What I mean is shadow IT, shadow systems, a lot of shadow existence in our, digital maze we are actually using for everyday operations here. So anything which you cannot see is going to add up to the overall certain uncertainty actually. So that's the reason, we need to have an additional 1.7 crore is going to be added for every unidentified asset or a system or a database which is actually having a sensitive data being actually exposed somewhere, right? So the detection gap also makes a lot of difference. In fact, when I was actually doing and searching for this particular number, I was really astonished by number 263 days. That is actually a hell lot of time by the time anything can be done, because there is no containment anymore, right? That means by then the data would have already changed at least 10 different hands, 10 different systems, 10 different demographics actually. So it's very, very important that we understand this number. And to bring your attention to this, I chose very carefully these numbers to talk about here. It about 9 months is something which is unacceptable by law, by regulatory, by business, by even our clients. Because once a client actually get the information that there's something happened 9 months back, and now things are actually being revolved or actually being reviewed, all the trust which is actually established over a period of several years of actually relation will be a questionable state actually, right? So definitely, coming to research and BFI sectors are, the very costliest targets, because a lot of people, of course, BFSI being BFSI, a lot of money. And then the research centers and the schools and other organizations are also very, because everybody thinks that, they're very easy target because they are not as equipped as actually the commercial companies or banks and other institutions which actually have the muscle to spend out there. Right. So let's look at a few more things, because the more you understand this numbers, the better you understand what I'm actually presenting to you here. And and there is another good thing or a behavior. There is actually a change of behavior happening. The trust deficit. People are less trusting. If you really see, 49% of global data subjects are asking that where they're coming from us. They're asking questions. Where is my data? How are you handling that data? Where are you using data, private data? So there is more increase. In fact, this was one of the most important metrics for us to understand. There is a rise of privacy awareness within our Indian consumers and other people who are actually subjecting to share their PII. So 49% of the global data subjects are inquiring, at least to understand, how can I get control over my data, which is actually used by these, giant organizations for their purposes. Actually, there is actually a rise, which is 49 is one of the fantastic numbers. I think we fare third or fourth in the world actually, when it comes to the eagerness to control the privacy data. And so 47% of customers globally have ended relations. So based on 49 and 47 are very close. That means if they suspect, they are not thinking 1 second to simply end the relation with them, whether it is actually a bank, whether it is actually an institution where certain PII is mandatory to share. They are not really going shying away. They're simply saying, thank you very much. Let me find somebody who is actually safe and secure to share my data and actually information with actually. So 86% of users demanded that privacy right. They're asking openly now. Right. Even now, imagine the DPDP Act actually having about 1.5 year timeline for mandating almost a full-fledged implementation of DPDP Act and the assessments and everything. If this is going to go high, meaning all of the people, many of the people who are actually using this digital wave are going to question it. That means every organization has to really get ready, right? So definitely it's very, very important that we get ready to really get this particular thing addressed properly. Otherwise, any business will be left over in the back end, actually, in the back. And definitely, data handling puts about 3%, while banking remains most trusted. So again, banks have actually comfortably done a lot of investment. They went ahead and actually implemented right from earlier, where a simple username, password based access to so many other hurdles, not only to prevent the fraudulent controls to prevent the transactions, there are now controls around preventing the privacy as well. Of course, there's a lot to be done here, but definitely they're much better than others. And actually, what is the ROI? Why do we need to then invest on a privacy by design? Right? That's the reason I was choosing these numbers carefully for you to understand. If you don't understand what is the preventing, the cost of actually being victim versus what is the prevention cost. Prevention cost, every dollar is spent is actually, every dollar is spent on privacy is averaging about 2.70. There is, almost like 200%, 270% increase actually, right? So there is always a better motivation to invest in the privacy by design, right from the very early stages of the system, which is actually going to, which is designed to really capture the personal information, because we are talking specifically about DPDP. Right. So if you really look at the data privacy, digital personal data privacy, there itself, everything is actually clearly being replicated. It's very clearly conveying that it is digital in the form. That means we are only talking about systems and their behaviors, their interconnectivity, their usage, how they are actually securely managed, and how are they actually prevented from being, simply available for any adversary to take over actually, right? So there is actually almost like 95% of buy-in from the executives to really, start investing on these programs. And I have solutions which actually are going to help them. Privacy enhancing technology. There are a lot of tools and technologies which are actually coming. Sometimes actually they might be very tiny solution, but they actually come and fit to the large system to be able to actually, either encrypt the system or actually prevent the data which is being actually available within plain text or other kind of open exposure there. And then one last slide before we actually go there, I definitely wanted to talk about AI, because whether we accept or not, we are already being either victimized, we don't even know that, but everybody's already waiting to unearth the incidents around them, because most of the time their information might have already leaked either deliberately or accidentally, because some people think that, for example, if you take, there was one kind of a photograph which was actually generated by OpenAI, and everybody simply submitted their camera to them. We don't know whether they actually also have taken the iris, from that photographs. We don't know. So if you really take from reality point of view, 15% of employees have already submitted some sensitive data already. In fact, I know so many incident in my recent experience where entire organization's HR database itself is actually being shared openly with one of these some of these LLMs which are available, thinking that it's going to help them actually. So it's very dangerous. Awareness has to come. That's the reason I'm insist. And I actually, though it is not directly relevant to, I thought we'll speak very quickly about AI as well, because anyway, DPDP is going to be impacted with AI as well. The compliance is going to be heavily influenced and impacted with that as well. So 40% organizations have already reported that AIC privacy. So these are not very well spoken, because every organization would like to save their face. They always talk about in these closed circuits or try to prevent the news being spread actually, right? So 60% of Indian companies still lack any formal governance policy. So imagine, things are available for people to use openly and nobody's controlling. People go to certain GPTs, certain things, assuming that they are actually their privacy is actually kept, but we don't know what all the models being trained, what kind of information is actually taken. So now I think we are moving into the information I wanted to present to you today. Those are only the numbers I wanted to just get your attention, so that we give more importance to the subsequent thing which I'm actually talking about. So I sincerely believe is that compliance is not equal to control. What is the meaning of it basically? So compliance is not equal to control is you assume that we are compliant to a particular standard. The problem, if you don't have the complete ecosystem built around it, they are not going to be very well compliant. But if you really have a control also in place, even controls are actually being implemented, then the certainty to say that this equal to is is going to come close to this not equal to going to become very close to equal, because they can never be equal, but they can really be made near equal to each other. We'll see what it is. And this is the only slide probably I'll be having about DPDP Act, because I still thought we all have to be on the same page about DPDP, because it's built around 5 system outcomes. See, my language itself is very different. I am not talking from the DPDP Act. I'm only talking from a systems perspective, actually. So the first system outcome is a lawful and informed processing. Whatever the language the DPDP might have used, what is there actually? They are actually insisting that you collect the data based on a proper notice, you collect for the purpose, you don't use beyond it, like that, right? There are about 17 principles which are actually there. So about 5 which I think can be directly translated into a system behavior. So lawful and informed processing. It very clearly means that it has to be a legitimate purpose we collect for. All the the subject must be aware that for what purposes it's being being captured and how it is actually being used only for that purpose. The second one is actually purpose of limitation and data minimization. Collect only the information you need, not the complete biodata, including their parental information or other thing actually. So always minimizing it and having capability for the subject to have individual control and right. Basically, they should be able to transparently see what's happening, and if they have a problem, they should be able to either modify or actually delete. And reasonable security safeguard. Again, the word is very reasonable. I mean, I used a reasonable here because there is no 100% security. There is no definition so far for a 100% secure system anybody can design. There's always a system which is evolving. There's always a system which is continually being improved. So, but as an organization, we need to ensure that within that knowledge, within that awareness of that entire system which we have internally, we need to have a reasonable security safeguards taken, as simple as encryption or any other things actually, right? And accountability is something is very, very important because from 2023 DPDP Act is released in 2023, it's available. We were all reading and actually thinking when it is going to come into effect. Now it is reality. So now board and everybody is actually going to be accountable. So that automatically brings two things. One, the board and other things will be ready to really spend $1 because if there is no compliance mandate, there is no dollar spent on it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So there's no budget allocated for this. Now that accountability is going to come onto their heads automatically, I'm hoping that there will be bigger and better budgets available for us to handle the privacy programs and protection programs around privacy. So these are all systems behavior, not a paperwork requirement, because if anything is paper, it is not even in the purview of DPDP, right? Only, but the problem is that somebody collects something on paper, converts it into digital, and what happens to that paper? And there are a lot of still questions which are there from DPDP to answer. I think those kind of clarifications are going to come. I think those our better friends, lawyers, and interpreters will be able to understand, help me understand as well. So what happens to that paper where it was actually sensitive information captured for some reason, and now it is being digitized? Then what happens to that paper? And how and what kind of controls are going to come? If you go to 27.1, yes, we have certain controls. So are we looking at an integrated management system here? I don't know. I want to wait and see here what's the clarity and how we actually take it to the next level. So in my view, I've been implementing, especially the information security from 2006 or earlier. In fact, even before ISO 27001 was actually named as ISO 27001, it was actually 7799, BS 7799. I remember if you really go with the statements in the standard, there is always a likelihood that you interpret in a very different way, you fail. Rather, if you really start taking it as how this can be equated to a security control or a process or a barrier which actually a guardrail or a guardrail which actually can be put into the system or a process which you're designing, that is the biggest success point, actually starting point. Actually, that's the reason I'm able to. I mean, I have no question in calling why a policy first system actually failed, because I've seen multiple times of them failing actually. In my own experience, I already heard from my fellows who are actually implementing much larger, smaller, medium, systems and entities as well. And the reality is actually, when the DPDP comes, when the data protection board is actually going to have a question on any organization, they are not going to audit your layer. They're going to audit your logs. They're going to look at your logs to understand what was actually happening in the system, how everything was actually monitored, how the safeguard system is actually being designed, and actually what's happening in the system. Because the logs are not, you cannot lie with the log, because everything can be traced back to time, events, and everything can be recreated. So the perspective is that we need to see that our data logs, our systems logs are actually, in the sense, how are you going to get a better logs? Because when you design a better system, which is going to prevent certain things by default, and then automatically going to log those events so that everything can be traced back, and actually the efforts of the organization can be can be appreciated by, or actually can at least be satisfying the regulatory authorities. The shift is actually, we need to stop interpreting English, but we need to start going towards automation. Now again, we are actually beyond automation already in the era. We are actually, I don't know whether it is I can call here or not. We are actually gone beyond an automation now. People are thinking beyond automation in the sense that people are learning, the models are learning, LLMs are learning, people are creating their own industry and specific LLMs and other GPTs which actually can help them. And then one of the biggest problem with actually, not digitized when having control or system-based controls is that, there's always a latency with the human-led privacy program, because there is always a periodicity associated. For example, we say a monthly audit, a weekly report, or a quarterly review by DPO, or certain things like. There is always a time gap between. There is always a latency between a review to review. I think that is something is going to be really a problem. On top of it, really, there's always even though there is actually periodicity of a weekly, monthly, whatever it is, there is another problem. Problem is, they also go with the sampling, because humanly it is not possible to audit everything, maybe based on the size, right? So human in the loop is very important. I think that's 100% required from an AI area. I think otherwise we are going to lose control over it, or we are going to completely get into a very dark side of AI. But definitely, human in the loop is required, but not human-led privacy reviews, because human-led reviews are going to have latencies by design, actually, right? Because you cannot avoid, you cannot have somebody every day reviewing it, because then the cost of implementation itself is going to go high, because human is not a script which is actually run automatically, either scheduled or on a click of a button, actually. And the scale, 1 billion records cannot be managed by 10 compliance officers. We don't know. 10, I mean, I'm just taking an example here. If you really take a medium sizable company itself, 1 billion records is nothing. If you really see a very active, let's say, a system where privacy information actually being, interchangeably used by every department, or every transaction, or every process happening there. So if your privacy controls are in the PDF manual, not in a CI/CD, what I mean is basically you should have those things embedded into your automations. Whether I'm just taking an example of CI/CD pipeline, because what I'm saying is a development life cycle. But maybe there is an opportunity for you to integrate an additional rule. Say that only when we'll also see. I have some slides where I'm actually proposing a system which actually can be designed right from ground up to see how those prevent controls actually can be taken to the next level, instead of being in a PDF available on your integrated management system, actually. So we saw earlier a slide where we spoke about 5 layers, a core design of the DPDP. So now I would like to propose transforming that into a thinking differently, thinking as a layer-wise security. Because a layered security, a layered privacy program is easy to implement, easy to have a control, and easy to actually to get the progress managed and monitored, actually. Because I told you in the beginning, you cannot monitor something, or you cannot measure something, you cannot improve it. So my thought is actually, again, these are all my thoughts, and for all education purposes only. I'm thinking, beyond, outside of the box, to be able to actually, come to you with more questions than answers, so that you will take all these things and actually improve this to the next level. That's the intention, because I'm telling you, no matter how much of work I have done, I will always be there at the bottom of it, because there is always a lot to learn. When we all join together to understand further. So my current thought is that instead of clauses, if you now think from a layer point of view, because for any system you really have these 4 layers: identity layer, logic layer, governance layer, compute layer. Any application, where I'm not talking about even if you take a legacy application, I think all these 4 layers can be really traced, because a system cannot be functional without any of these things, actually. Because identity layer, where somebody really has to be identifying what's happening with that, right? So what my proposal is that a data principal is basically a person who is actually giving their data. So secure identity access management systems have data principal identification, in the sense that you make a PII compounded with, let's say, a principal, a subject, and actually make it as one of the smallest unit of the securable object in your code or in your thinking. That's how you are going to really protect in a identity layer actually. And when it comes to so once you data collect, you are going to have a consent. After the consent, you are going to have data being collected. So what I'm saying is, think consent management as a logic layer where you will definitely have purpose limitation enforced via code. And then you will have actually data fiduciary, which is actually the company which is actually collecting and having purpose to really do something with the data. So we definitely have to have an automated observability of privacy element, where all that information is going. If they have further data processors or themselves are actually doing the data processing, they need to have what's happening with this privacy and what all elements actually are being created and how they actually can be observed to be able to actually keep the tab on it. And then the compute layer is basically where the processing is actually happening. Whether it might sometimes, many times it might be outsourced or actually it might be actually in-house. Data processor also might be one company where they might be data fiduciary as well. Data processor as well. I'm not talking about a significant data fiduciary or a data fiduciary. Both are actually same. Maybe the accountability might be higher and bigger when it comes to an SDF rather. So basically what I'm saying is think like a 4 security layers or a layer wise instead of actually class wise. And then what is the telemetry, the new audit? So what is the privacy telemetry? So a shift from annual audit to a continual observability. So I told you in the beginning, if you have a human-led privacy reviews or accountability, there is actually latency. To avoid that, what we can do, we can get into metrics for engineers, withdraw latency. So you need to have a created metadata created around having latencies mentioned in the database itself. So automatically when the system is actually pursuing or using the data or actually transcending the data to some other layer, automatically is going to be withdrawn based on that particular telemetry, right? So data minimization ratio, PI stored versus PI actually used. So you need to have always a measurement, what data being actually used, what is actually simply there lying there without actually being used. So always have to reduce that burden of actually having stored data which is not actually used, right? And then the detection of data used for unmapped purposes. So always, if any data is actually collected, we should be able to actually tell from with the system behavior itself, what are all the purpose actually it is being used and what are all the purposes it is actually being used for unmapped purposes, in the sense that there is no consent, there is no purpose of that particular data being actually or it's not actually announced to the subject that this is the data which actually being used for. Those are the things we need to really start capturing, so that these are the things which actually will be new audit trail for overall program adherence actually. Again, these are from a system point of view, I'm thinking. And then you need to have a clarity on what is the failure mode and effective analysis. We need to continuously do this kind of analysis instead of thinking what does Section 6 is actually saying, for example, right? So data used for marketing without a tag. For example, if that incident happens, what is the, the system is not designed to prevent that by design itself. The privacy by design is not accounted there. So a lot of times what happens, data is collected for one particular purpose, but the same data is actually used for marketing also without actually being, let's say, additional control or a notice actually being actually taken from the subjects. So then the problem actually, is actually bigger, because if audited, is going to be much more non-compliance to DPDP Act. So we need to be really careful. So purpose metadata in database schema, and having attribute-based, access, attribute-based access control. Again, we are moving away from very role-based data access itself to a lower level where possible, which I told you earlier. If you really can make one data subject as one particular object, you will be able to actually limit what kind of a grouping or categorization will be able to access based on the purpose they're actually serving in the system actually. So we can have an attribute-based access control rather than actually an overall access which actually going to be given to to the users within the company or within the business process we're actually running. And then we need to have something. Circuit breaker is very important. The minute something is detected, everything should really get stopped. So that way, what happens, the privacy, further breaches will actually be prevented, right? If data is not, let's say, data is encrypted and masked, if the presented by, when if the data is actually detected that it's not actually mapped, automatically the token should be able to detect and actually stop from the data being flowing to the next stage of the workflow. So if you can think of, let's say, for example, let's take an example here. So let's say there is one API which is actually taking certain information from a database, let's say PAI, and then it is actually transferring that information to, let's say, a payment gateway. So if it is not encrypted, if it is not by SSL by default, automatically within that particular transaction, if one of the sensor is actually going to say that this particular activity cannot further be processed, it clearly be stopped here itself, then that entire breach itself is actually stopped. So that's what I'm actually proposing. So you should be able to detect in between of the data transfer or a data usage or any of those things in all those workflows which you're actually having as part of your system. You should have a circuit breakers where they can detect if there is something which is actually violating versus what actually being already proposed for. So that way, what happens is your systems are intelligent. You don't need anybody humanly, available to really be able to actually go and validate that, because your system is already stopped it. You'll be able to actually, if in case a manual review can happen, if it is legitimate, they will be able to actually not override, but at least adjust the same circuit board to be able to actually prevent the next occurrence of such kind of failure which is actually caught by this particular circuit breaker. So we need to design systems in such manner. And then I know I'm actually moving. I mean, I have a lot more to cover. That's the reason I might be a little fast here. I will be sharing this entire presentation with all of you, so we can actually continue through FTTCI for actually for further more conversation as well. Actually, right? So let's quickly, because considering the time, we only have about 15 minutes or so. So now what I think, thinking from an engineering side, again, as I told you in the very beginning itself, this is not a DPDP, clause training. That's the reason you are seeing a lot of engineering than actually policy and other info, language actually being used here, right? So we're talking directly about an imaginary system which can be re-engineered. For example, you can create a consent ledger. So statutory is asking for a notice and choice, right? People should be able to get a notice and they should be able to decide whether they want to participate or not. A system that's translating that into a system requirement, an immutable version controlled ledger, in the sense, a system which actually can behave like an immutable thing. Once you actually make change, it will not be able to actually alert, because if you need a new system, then you should actually come up with a new notice rather than actually the same notice being used for multiple purposes. That's what actually I mean. So technically getting into a little deeper, every data field is tagged with a consent ID. So if you have, let's say, 10 fields which are collected, let's say name, date of birth, and few other data, personally PAI is collected. If every field, if every smallest PAI data piece is actually is tagged with the consent ID, and if the consent ID itself is actually immutable, in the sense that if let's say for some reason system is capable of actually withdrawing the consent from that, automatically that field itself can actually be will not be able to, no system will be able to use internally, right? Because every token, every particular smallest data field is actually having that level of controllable metadata which can be used, right? So that's what actually I mean by having a system which is going to have something called a consent ledger from a technology and system point of view, actually. And then next one is actually purpose binding via ABAC. Now, the same data field, which is also having a consent ID as a immutable metadata. So once the data is actually in the database, any developer can query it, right? So in fact, I recently came up with one company where once an employee goes out of the company, what they're doing is, if they have to have any reference of that particular person information after, let's say, 1 year or 6 months, they simply go to the database and query, because their system is not doing anything on the presentation layer. So that means what? Everybody has access to the database directly. So if I have a database access directly, I not only query for what actually was the problem I'm trying to solve, versus whatever I want, I can do as somebody who you authorized to query a database there. So now you need to move from that kind of a level of access. You need to move to a bank which is going to completely restrict my access to the purpose actually I'm doing. So access is granted only if, again, this is some little, of course, these days we all have to understand some amount of scripting. So I thought, let me just paste some script here, So if any of these things have to be, let's say, no or zero, automatically the query will actually fail. So we are now, we spoke about consent management. Now we are actually binding that into a attribute-based control, and then the other problem with the data DPDP will be that once the subject withdraws the consent and requests for, let's say, erasure, the problem is that again you have retention policies, and there are certain data which cannot be simply deleted because subject is asking, because RBI might be asking something, SEBI might be asking for something, or other regulatory authority might be having some kind of retention period. So then how all those things can be automated? Because if everything is simply left for people to delete the data, so it will be problem. So rather we can actually have an automated data disposal as well, so that if something is retained for, let's say, for a regulatory purpose for 3 years, that system knows automatically because it is tagged, and when the third year comes, automatically the data is actually gone. Or let's say there is certain data which actually can be immediately deleted when the subject is actually requested for. So that level of actually metadata based automated data disposal is going to help very much, so that any of those data which is not supposed to be there after the withdrawal of consent, or actually the purpose actually data retention policies are expired by the regulatory authorities also, then this is going to come into a self-restricting data objects are actually very, very essential here. And these are all possible. Again, I'm not talking something future. These are all already there. In fact, I myself have seen over the last several years these systems actually being in effect, available for us to really simply go and adapt. That's the reason I'm not naming any particular vendor or a solution here, but these are very much available in the market for us to adapt actually, right? And then the logs are only real evidence. So when there is some problem with our implementation, or when there is some kind of an annual review by the regulatory authority, the only thing they will go with actually with those logs which are actually preventing, telling us the story of how actually everything is actually being purpose limited, how is actually data retention policies are effective, how those automatic purging of data based on the retention period expiry, all of those actually going to be verified only through evidence. If you automate versus manual again, there will be a lot of things which will be able to, which you have to show to be able to show that you are compliant. Rather here it is very simple, show the log, maybe simply have a log parser which will be able to actually even tell them the complete visibility, everything will be traced back to the actual purpose actually being activities being actually performed out there. So that's what actually I'm thinking should be done here. And I don't think anything good enough is actually no longer enough, because every day we are being challenged, not only in business but even in personal life. Earlier something good was okay, but these days everybody wants a better version of that yesterday's thing actually. So there is no longer good enough, because every day things are actually being improved. So I'm thinking that from 2026, all significant data fiduciaries, or even data fiduciaries which are actually, of course, there is still a lot to come from Government of India in terms of clarity on SDF, who are all fall into that category and everything. But I think things are actually going to be very, very very serious from 2026, because the date of implementation is coming, approaching already, right? So data protection impact assessments are very new product. So whenever any new product being actually pursued, or even if you're buying a solution from market, you should ensure that what are the workflows and how they're actually traversing the data from collection to disposal actually, and how everything is actually flowing through, and how the privacy by design was inbuilt to it, and by default is actually guaranteed. So you need to have some kind of an impact assessment by your systems, your people, before actually adapting the solution or even developing actually. And also sometimes it's always better if you are developing in-house, you always better to take a help of third parties, so that there is always an additional review and evidence of actually system being completely reviewed by external party without having a bias like internal developers would have actually. And then of course board members are now accountable for system negligence also. So DPDP being by nature itself, digital privacy data protection. Everything is digital. By nature, that law is around systems only, around clouds and our everyday internet behavior actually. So we need to be really mindful of this being mandated on the personal level to level also. And then you need to, again, I started with measurements. I'm actually coming to a very good counter measure for actually, a privacy dashboard, which is actually a number based, right? Don't assume that everything is okay because I wrote a magic system which is going to take automatically actions. No, you still have to have some certain metrics, periodic metrics recorded, consent withdrawal latency, data minimization ratio, unauthorized access attempts actually being detected, because security systems are actually detecting the other thing, but you need to detect about the privacy being, how many number of times unauthorized access actually was attempted on the systems. In spite of having a system which prevents, you need to have a metric so that you can improve on it, right? Again, I'm a very big believer of actually having quantification than actually any subjective, because we cannot prove anything in English. We only can prove with numbers, right? And then, so I think definitely one of the most important thing takeaway for me while I was actually getting ready to talk to all of you is that if we train people on our own employees on the DPDP rules, we are again going back to the old era where the policies were always there in a PDF format or some kind of a integrated management system. Rather, we actually should be training our people on the system behavior, about talking closely with IT engineers and IT architects and developers to actually have a system which is actually going to enforce them by default and improve it over a period of time, and actually get ready for compliance than actually relying only on by interpreting the DPDP rules actually. So give the interpretation, you definitely have to interpret the DPDP rules, but you need to translate them to a system behavior in terms of either those best things like an RBAC or ABAC controls or databases which are so intelligent. In fact, these days a database itself is so intelligent that you can actually build all these ABAC into the database itself. Forget about actually even the presentation layer actually. So you need to act and adapt those systems which are capable for you to be very sure, very confident of your systems and your compliance to DPDP. Right. So it's a next generation trustworthy software is something what I'm actually envisioning that you all should really be implementing and actually taking it forward. Of course, this is only, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm only triggering your thought. It is not possible for me, even if I spend next 2 hours, to completely present a private privacy by design system here, because that is completely contextual, that is subject to every company's appetite and risk capability and so many other things which actually come into play there. Right, I'm available. Even for us open chat, you don't have to be paid. It always can be simply a conversation we can have using these mediums here. I'm available actively on LinkedIn. Of course, I will be available through FTCCI, as well. All these leadership also will be able to actually, guide you to have the, conversation made with me. But again, very, very important. Please remember, I'm no expert complete here. I'm only a beginner. I'm learning. I'm also just trying to click that or trigger that thought process for you to think about a system, not a process you can roll out, which is actually verbal or any other in nature. Otherwise, we are cooking something which is ready to fail tomorrow morning when we roll out. So I'm ready for questions. I don't know how I'm actually faring on time.
You are faring well on time, Sinu, and thanks for this wonderful talk. The forum is open for the questions. You can post your questions in the Q&A panel. I will read on your behalf. And so for the people who are asking for the presentation, we are going to get the consent from the speaker and share the presentation to you. And also the recording of this particular session is available. And post this particular session, that recording will be shared with the participants directly on their email who attended this particular session. That answers that. So if you have any specific questions related to the topic, please post it. Srinu, we have 3 questions coming up.
Okay.
I'll just try to read it out on the people's bill from the participants angle.
Sure.
So first question is on, as enterprises accelerate AI adoption, where do you see the most underestimated privacy and accountability gap emerging? And how should boards and senior leaders govern it differently under DPDP expectations?
Fantastic question. In fact, largely in the AI, we all think that, ChatGPT is something available as a friend to talk about anything and everything. So we never really, not even the leadership actually contained. So what's happened is we simply have solutions which are not monitored, controlled, not even moderated are available in the system. So everybody is able to copy paste information, whether it is sensitive or not, right? So I think, having certain level of actually control over what kind of a tools. The very first thing is actually to control where all those leaking opportunities are there in terms of actually AI solutions. So you need somebody, every enterprise has to have a approved list of AI solutions which still can really be focusing on prevention of these kind of leakages. So I think having approved AI solutions internally is one of the most important things to start with, and also having prompt engineering, where we having certain control over the prompts and having some kind of a proxyable proxy capability, prompting capability is very, very important, because invariably people simply include certain PII data into that, and then it goes into beyond the controlled landscape actually. So I think some kind of a proxies which actually can even prevent prompt level leakages also is very, very important. Third and most important always is actually to educate people about don't trust any tool by default. It is something which has to be verified and actually approved by the system to be able to use and adapt. I think those are the three things which I think I will recommend out there, Bala.
Fantastic. I believe there were also questions, since you brought in the question of the tools. There was a question people were asking, what are the good tools available in this area? Anything to suggest? It's coming from Swati.
Okay, so I think I will. When it's not good to get a recorded session like this, we'll actually share those things through the presentation or other mediums there. We'll come back over, or we'll publish some kind of article where all of these can be really published over it. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. There's a question which is coming in, especially on the reverse engineering. If you reverse engineer the DPDP Act from the ARM, it seeks to prevent. Which one system level design change should enterprises prioritize? Taking in the period of next 12 months to materially reduce privacy risk.
Oh, I think Clause 6. I think you already saw that in one of the Clause 6 is one of the most important clause to reverse engineer and worry about.
Clause 6.
Which I mentioned, okay. I think, I think if you just do a little bit of research around Clause 6, you will understand what I'm actually saying. Clause 6 is one of the most important things to be re-engineered.
Then there is a question coming in for organizations that already have DPDP policies in place. What are the top 2 indicators that tell you whether the implementation is actually defensible in front of a regulator, not just compliant on paper?
Fantastic question. In fact, the immediate thing need to be done is actually have some kind of an assessment done by an individual independent company to really assess the policy's effectiveness on the floor itself is very important. And looking at what kind of incident actually were recorded earlier in the same system to see the probability and actually understand, these two things can give, because if they don't have any metrics around it already designed, it's very hard to tell. But then only the way is actually having somebody else come and actually verify that system, audit that system and actually to be able to give a report differently.
Fair. Yeah. Pradeep was asking, if someone wants to become a DPO, are there any good resources and certifications you can suggest?
Though I have certifications, I don't think certifications are going to make us any ready. So have, for example, for a DPO, understanding the data lifecycle and understanding, how what all the technologies within this data lifecycle, right from inception to the collection to disposal, what all the solutions by default available. Going through that, more of actually reading than certifications. Certifications are many. In fact, in fact, I might not actually certify DPO, but I'm actually working with DPOs from last at least 11 years, 10, 14 years also. So I think, it's more of that inquisitive learning which actually required than a certification, because certification, they make you sit for 5 days. 27701 is one of the most important things to start with. And not for a certification point of view, but from understanding from privacy team's point of view is very, very good reference standard. It's not a certifiable standard, but people are offering implementation certification on that. I think that's the best reference of the, you just somehow get either purchase or actually get read it. Reading itself is going to give you a lot of learning out there.
Anwar is asking a question. What will
I
be
think
the scope of data protection impact assessment and audit, especially due diligence of algorithms in case of decision making, and time limit for the redressal of grievance of an individual?
yeah. So the DPIA, so right, impact assessment itself we are talking, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So basically the DPIA, I don't know, people are talking today, but DPIA was existing from earlier days where you definitely have certain verification being was mandatory. Even the SOC 2 also we used to do, remember, I remember very first time doing it. So basically, whether it is mandated for only SDF or not, I think practicing from today, whether irrespective of size of organization, DPIA is very, very important. My personal recommendation would be that, and to get an impact assessment done so that you know, irrespective whether DPDP is mandating, because that mandates having a DPU designated, somebody who's aware of their workflows, their data systems requirement for their internal systems and the compliance, other things. I think I would go that route, Bala. So we have one hand here.
This is Surya.
Surya.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Surya. Go ahead, Surya.
Yeah, thanks, Bala, and thanks, Srinu, for that fantastic presentation. And my question is regarding the data fiduciary from the board point of view. Like in your presentation, you talked about the various layers and the governance layers and consent management layer. So my question is, like, the consent manager is a layer that is built within the company, or is it going to be a third party entity which will act as a consent manager for all the various data principles, and as a company, as a board, you have to basically align with the consent manager to get the required data. So this consent manager, is it part of the organization, or it's going to be outside of the organization?
Well, Surya, I can't appreciate you for asking this question. Fantastic. Very, very important and vital. We all forgot to really talk about. See, the consent manager, I don't know, DPDP rules have already spoke about the companies applying to become a consent manager. So it is an outsourceable company activity now. We already going, in fact, this is already in implementation. If you really now go, let's say you want to sign into NordVPN, right? You can sign in two ways. One is using their ecosystem or actually Google system, right? Where Google authenticates you, but still gives you, or LinkedIn, something like that, right?
Yes.
What's happening? You already have a practiced, undocumented, not mandated by the law, but it is already existing in our practice. So the same thing is going to happen. Where what happens is these consent managers will eventually be able to take consent on behalf of multiple companies for using your data. So it is actually evolving into a separate business entity now, very soon.
Okay.
Of course, we were doing internally. There's nothing wrong in it, but the problem is, when you outsource it, your control over it is going to be better because you can mandate things with a number.
Okay. Yeah, and also it will be useful, easy for the data principle, because you will have only one consent manager rather than going with each every organization and then giving all your data.
Imagine you have let's say 4 group of companies, right?
Yeah.
So you are not going to now go to a consent for every entity differently, right? What you can do, you can take one consent which actually at least gives you your group of companies the access to that particular thing, right? You can think of that way.
Okay. And the other question is in the data minimization, for example, right now, if you see, we have a blanket agreement where nobody reads it. So much of information is there to collect all the kinds of data. So as per this new DPDP Act, where you said law and purposeful data, right? So whatever is your requirement, only that data you have to collect, right? So how can board design, for various purposes, what data has to collect and ensure that only that data is getting collected? Is there any inbuilt system mechanism to kind of monitor that from the board level?
Yes, so that's what I think. One of the slide I mentioned, having let's say there is a problem which let's say a solution or a problem, let's say board is trying to solve for a business to run. Okay, So in that situation, my thought process and my recommendation would be to conduct a data processing, DPA. So you assessment. Basically, you for example, for that particular system, which in the scope for a discussion, you need to ask what are the bare minimum. Start with the least privilege or least data collection requirements, and then if you apply those principles by the board itself, is they are talking that collect only the least possible, then the entire ecosystem below you is going to think very differently, because you already have put a challenge that you're going to use the least privilege concept from security into here the least data collection. So you're going to do a DPA, data processing assessment. In that assessment itself, you're going to question every time a data being actually collected or actually getting into a next workflow. You're going to what is the bare minimum data you need to go into the next phase. For example, you might collect, let's say, 10 attributes in the beginning, but you might not need 10 for, let's say, getting a payment done via outsourced, let's say, a payment gateway recording. So you don't have to completely transfer that entire information, right? You're only going to call that API and give only those 2 attributes. So if you really break down the system like that, you'll be able to actually understand what are the bare minimum, the least number of data attributes I need, or PII attributes I need to be able to do it. So you can mandate from your architecture team, or or the team which is finalizing a solution for you to adapt from market.
Oh, okay. So basically, pilot case where what data fields you are really need for the processing, and then you basically mask out or don't need the other data fields. So that's how
Absolutely.
you kind of test it. Okay. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much,
Thank you.
Srinu. I will
Thank you,
take
Surya. Fatima,
Absolutely.
you can ask your question. Fatima. Fatima, you can unmute and ask your question. Okay, I would now allow Anwar Akhtar to ask your
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Actually, I'm also practicing last 15 years. The contrast part which I am looking is like what the awareness which is going deeper from because what we are talking about, like corporates, they already have an awareness, but the people, well, all those startups, all the companies already, in the system ecosystem, and we already having data already, large data set in the systems. That is one. And second one is the data breach, which you have presented in your slide, is like delay is alarming, right? 9 months, right?
269 days.
So how we will 72 hours, right?
Yeah, imagine now. I think I don't know. I think we should have a brownie for you. You really staggered 2 important things. One is basically 269. I thought somebody will ask me. From 269, we have to bring it to 72 hours. DPDP is 72.
Yeah, because it needs multiple of things and controls of the system.
I mean, that's why I told that these are not legal presentation. I'm only talking technology, because I'll tell you. So it's very much possible. Anwar, you asked a good question. In fact, it's very much possible if we, for example, let me go systematically. The first one you asked, every small startup beginning, whatever, everybody has PII without their knowledge.
Exactly.
And they were greedy in the very stage. I mean, even if I'm a startup,
50 rupees, 100 rupees, you can take a bulk of data. You can get it.
So every startup, including me, will be greedy to collect more and more possible, because I don't know what is my appetite yet. Correct? So I've collected. So now I have a bunch of data sitting in my database. Now suddenly DPDP is coming. So first thing, now all these trainings and all you leaders are going to make sure that these are the small 1 or 2 important things we need to talk on all the forums possible. If you go to a meeting, you should definitely say that, hey, first look into what you have, minimize what you have, get rid of what you don't need. So if every leader like you walks into a room, and actually whether it is mandate or not, you ask this question, I'm telling you, this slowly, automatically, all these startup ecosystem is going to learn that they need to minimize their appetite to collect the data. That's my first thinking, because what I do in today also, if I walk into any meeting from the last several years, my question is whether it is relevant or not. What is the burning problem for my company? I will ask those questions, whether they are relevant people or not. At least it will spread, right? So that's the only way. Awareness is the only way. Awareness only comes from the top down. Only when the mandate comes from the top, people will listen. Otherwise, there is no brownie point for them, right? And second thing is actually how to bring 269 days into 72 hours. It is very much possible. In fact, I'm telling you, it is only possible if you think like what I'm actually presenting today. But if you still go back to the traditional old methods of actually collecting data and actually transcending into all these endeavors, it is not possible. So we need to have those critical conversation with those architects. For example, let's say you have a private SOC. Let's say most of the companies will have SOC or outsource available, right? So they're only giving you security related incidents and anomalies, right? So now you need to start parallelly working on first identifying the privacy related anomalies and how they can be detected, how they can be really coming to you for you to really resolve, because all the security is not equal to privacy, right? So you need to start creating that. That's the only way you can actually bring that 269 eventually before 1.5 years to 72 hours.
Yeah, my perception actually, which I know, is that why I take with that. See, awareness is the one of the important point, and second is that how we treat a security, because people think security is a DPO job, a CISO job, or XYZ job, right? But it is not the case here. DPO, like data privacy, especially data privacy, is everybody's job. Because it's like brushing your teeth in the morning. You have to take all the precautions in the day-to-day life to make privacy at the priority, right? So that's why I say when you go to the insurance agent and when you have a test and you have some elevation of BP or something like that, immediately they will tell you, okay, sir, you can get an health insurance and do this and that, right? Why? Because same applies to DPDPA. Now penalty in the consumer, nobody will wear helmet only because with their safety. When we know on the road, people wearing helmet because of penalties and the fines. So we need to focus on that also.
Absolutely. I think, the first and foremost thing, I think if everybody agrees, I would actually do if I'm working for some company or if somebody asking me something, I first say that, take a print of privacy policy, put it everywhere people see. That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anwar.
Pradeep, one last question before we wind up.
Srinu, one quick question. I'm not sure if you have addressed this or not. See, there are so many, protocols. You have 27,001, you have GDPR, you have, you have BNS Act, you have IT Act, you have DPDP Act. Is there a good framework where companies can use to understand, what is overlapping, what is covered in each, and what is not covered in each, and something like that?
Yeah. So I know you mentioned at least 6 of them, but not see the minute you think 6 of them, you even if I think about anything, let's say more than one, if there are 6 things to think, my brain freezes. So to come out of that situation, what I do personally, I'm actually telling you, Pradeep, what I will do, I will go to 27701 and read it as actually very in depth. It has the best privacy principles and how they can be implemented available. So take the reference of that, and it actually overlaps a lot with all these things which you just mentioned. If you take, for example, certain is only mandate. IT Act is only asking for a few things. IT Act 2000 or 2008. Or if you take DPDP Act 2023, we are now talking because there is a mandate coming, right? But it again is a subset of it. So if you read 27701 based 27701 will be a good answer. So start with 27701, but always take a reference along with 27001. ISMS and PIMS together will be a great substitute to learn and actually implement a better system.
Is there a good open source ISMS you suggest for people to just practice?
ISMS to practice. I mean, you're talking about a GRC tool or something?
Yeah.
No, I think
just to practice, because most of them are paid ones, right? So just to
Yeah, so there is something called CISO Assist, which is a CISO Assistant, which is available. So you can actually, because it also can give you a leverage of actually mapping various standards with one subset of one available attribute of data. So I think I would recommend you to spend time with that, which is free.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Ian.
No problem. My pleasure.
There's a lot of questions, I think there's a lot of interest coming in this particular area. And probably we'll try to compile those set of questions and share it, because if I start reading out, it may take some more time for me to complete this particular talk.
And it might not be effective also because, it has to be on the fly answer. So it's always a limitation out there. And in fact, Bala, I would appreciate you because, I can understand that you're in some kind of airport traveling and you're doing this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your
Currently in the airport, I'll be boarding the flight in next 1.5 hours. That's
yeah,
fine. But this talk was interesting. That's the reason I thought let me join in and try to do this. So
very nice.
thank you, Sinu, for doing this wonderful talk. And as we conclude, let me briefly reflect on what today's session was reinforcing to all of us. The discussion truly helped that we move beyond viewing the DPDP Act 2023 as a compliance checklist and instead start understanding it as a signal of intent and to prevent loss of individual control and also the unmanaged data harm, invisible processing and organization apathy towards a privacy risk what it is getting associated. The reverse engineering lens which has been shared by you today clearly showed how privacy must be embedded into a governance models, operating processes and system design, not treated as an after-through a legal exercise, which is what I was really envisaging. The way you explained about the components which are involved, the way you explained about the different governance layers, the 4 layers, which was really helping the people to unlock what is this DPDP Act all about. The key takeaway I would say for all the leaders is clear, defensible implementation matters more than the documentation intent. Privacy, cybersecurity, and now AI governance must work together as part of a single, accountable digital governance fabric. As long as we do that, we will be able to make a big difference for ourselves and to the enterprise where we are associated. On behalf of FTCCI and ICT and Startup Committee, I extend our sincere thanks to Srini Pasunori for an insightful and practitioner-led session with his reverse engineering lens on the DPDP. Your ability to connect regulation with real-world enterprise realities and to place privacy within a broader AI and risk governance context has given our audience clarity and also the confidence under which we need to really look at. My thanks to all the participants who have joined with a lot of enthusiasm, DPOs, CISOs, privacy and GRC technology and business leaders. Your participation, in fact, active engagement really helped in provoking the thoughtful questions. Your presence really enforced that we need to have such kind of a forums like this that can focus on outcomes, not just obligations. We look forward to continuing this particular series of conversations through future FTCCI initiatives. And most importantly, I would like to acknowledge and thank K. Mohan Raidu, our past chair for the ICT and Startup Committee, for bringing this particular session and bringing Sinu to this particular talk and helping us doing this. Thanks to FTCCI leadership team for managing this in a very short notice. And thank you all for all your time and wishing you a very productive and secure digital journey ahead. Thank you, Sinu, once again from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we are here talking together. As I mentioned, I'm only triggering. I'm not a complete authority for the knowledge. So we're all together learning. So I only wanted to trigger. I'm glad it is actually done very well. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I was not expecting that this many questions, which is wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's be in touch. Thank you. Mohan Raidu, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Bala, thank you. Sangeeta ma'am,
Thank you.
thank you. All the FTC leadership, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Srinu,
Thank you.
for a wonderful talk. Thank you.